Public speaking is so common. 63% of people fear public speaking. If you're socially anxious, that fear rises to like 97%. So it's very prevalent among a lot of people, but there's very limited research and there's very limited effective interventions that help to overcome it. The blankophobia, as I like to call it, worried about your mind going blank, that is a really common one. It's probably the most common fear that people have. I think the first thing to understand is going, well, what are we afraid of? What's the thing that I'm really worried about? But the other thing to think about is it the fact that you have lack of experience? You haven't presented much, so why would you think you're an expert or confident in it?
So I want to talk more about your journey, right? So you started as an actor, very successful, was on multiple shows, and then you transitioned, got a PhD in psychology. So I wanted to ask you about that. What made you want to make that transition?
I came from a background of, while I was an actor, I still didn't enjoy public speaking when I was younger, but it's changed the way I'm doing it, from opening doors to communicating to people. Having conversations like this is so rewarding, but actually confronting the fear is such a big task, and we don't know, well, how do we do it? Because when we go objectively, we can take our ego out of it and we can look at where we need specific help.
So I want to ask you, what are some common speech pitfalls that undermine people's authority when they're speaking and delivering a speech?
So a big one for me is...
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Beyond Ordinary Podcast. We're going to be talking about everything public speaking. I got the expert with me today, Alexander McWilliam. How you doing today, my good friend?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you?
Hey, man, cannot complain. So I want to bring you on to talk about public speaking because I think that's that's something that I actually personally want to get into. And I've really been delaying it because I want to make sure that, like, when I get out there, like, my stuff is crispy. So I was like, let me start bringing on people to help not only me learn, but my audience learn. So I want to ask you, how could someone reduce their nerves before delivering a speech?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because it's such a wide array of how things can work. I think the first thing to understand is going, well, what are we afraid of? What's the thing that I'm really worried about? A lot of people go, I'm worried about public speaking. I go, well, it's too broad. It's like, oh, I'm worried about X, Y, and Z. No, what is it specifically? So it could be, I'm worried about making mistakes. Is that the worry? Is that just in presenting, or is it everyday life? Well, if it's in everyday life, then you might work on developing that in many different environments. But if it's like, I'm worried that my audience are going to see me making mistakes. Okay, well, what is it about the mistakes? Oh, them seeing and me being embarrassed. Okay, so you can be very specific about what it is that you want to get over. And then there's multiple routes to do it. A real advocate for me, is exposure. It's traditionally called exposure therapy, but essentially, I'm afraid of something, I'm going to expose myself to that thing and reduce the intensity of that threat to me. So, example, if I'm afraid of public speaking, my aim is to essentially build up a staircase of scary situations that then build up to the penultimate big speech. So say I've got to present in front of 1,000 people. If I jump straight away to that one, it's probably going to be too overwhelming and I'm going to panic, fall, and maybe never want to present again. You sometimes get that in businesses where a new employee presents to the whole business straight away and it's a horrible experience and they never want to go back to it. So I might advocate and I'll go, okay, can you master speaking in front of one person? Then can you do 2 people, then 3, then 4, then 5? And you build it up from an audience point of view. But also you can build it up from a duration point of view. Can you say one word to your audience? Can you just say hello? Then can you introduce yourself? Hello, my name is Dr. McWilliam. Can you then introduce yourself in a bit more? So you can then go for duration. Can you handle that? And then you can go for complexity. So talking about ourselves, some people find it quite easy, or they might go, actually, what's harder than that? Talking about a topic or work-related topic might be hard. Then what's harder than that? Okay, talking about a topic I have no experience in. Talk to me for a minute about the root cause of photosynthesis. Okay, and you have to kind of do something you haven't prepped for. So when it comes to nerves and exposure, we want to have duration, audience size, and complexity of speeches that we can kind of expand our comfort bubble in. But the other thing to think about is Is it the fact that you have lack of experience? You haven't presented much. So why would you think you're an expert or confident in it? Like, I'm not a great basketball player. I'm tall, but I'm not a great basketball player. I'm sure that if someone said, "Oh yeah, you're going to play on the basketball team, this Friday, and it's the championship match," I would probably start panicking because I have no experience, no positive experiences. So can you get those multiple positive experiences when presenting? And that will help to reduce some of the nerves. So I think identify what it is and then give yourself exposure opportunities to presenting and have successful experiences as well. That's really important.
I think for me, my fear is just I just want to make sure that the audience gets value.
Mm.
I don't know how to really articulate what my personal fear would be, but I think probably just to make it general, I guess just looking dumb on stage, or maybe forgetting a certain part of the speech or whatever, and then all of a sudden, now I get in my head, and then now I start, stuttering a little more. That would probably be, at least for me, what I'd be nervous
So
to.
there's a few things there. You spoke about the audience wanting to get value. So
Mhm.
actually, if you think about it, you go, well, what's the consequences if they don't get value? Well, actually, you might perceive that they're going to judge you negatively by going,
Exactly.
oh, he hasn't given me value. I've just wasted, $50, $100 going to see him or at this conference. So it could be that. It could be, that negative judgment. The blankophobia, as I like to call it, worried about your mind going blank, that is a really common one. It's probably the most common fear that people have. I'm worried I'm going to forget about what I'm saying. I would always advocate practicing because the more you practice, then the more it's going to be instilled. Like your business inside and out, and you could probably chat about it really easily for 10 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, maybe even a day solidly because you know it. But if it's a more complicated topic that you're not as familiar with, that's when our brain goes, "Oh, what is that?" and our mind goes blank. But also, if your mind goes blank, have you got any techniques to go, okay, well, if it does go blank, what could I do? Well, I like to advocate going, if my mind goes blank, throw something back to the audience and go, okay, while I'm trying to remember what I'm saying, I go, what did everyone think about what I just said? Or take a moment now to reflect on your own presentation journey. And then I might go, right, what was I saying? Oh, great. One thing I missed, I want to talk about this, and you sort of go from there. So I think with a presentation, as long as you're instilling value to the audience, like you said, that worry of not giving them value, then they're going to walk away happy. And actually, you're going to start enjoying that experience. So I think there's multiple things you just shared there. We go, oh, I'm worried about this, worried about that, worried about that. Well, the getting value is ensuring that the audience knows what they're coming to see, and your message is aligned with what they're expecting it, which is good. Then blankophobia comes from like practicing and rehearsing and practicing under pressure as well to sort of cure there. And then looking silly, we go back to what are the consequences of looking silly? Do we again think that the audience is going to judge me in a negative fashion if I mess up? Is it goes back to, oh, they're going to judge me? Oh, it's a bad experience. So again, can we be comfortable or okay in our own bodies to go, if I look a little bit silly, it's okay? Because actually, the audience is probably not going to remember it that much. Oh, yeah, he messed up a bit. Probably won't remember it. I'll remember the first bit of your presentation, the last bit, the middle, something will happen. So if you can master your start, master your end, then actually the middle bit can be really forgiving with mistakes and errors.
Hmm. I like that. I like that because typically people are going to hook onto the first thing that you say, which is why for at least my podcast, I like to just really just dive right in as opposed to give like some like 2 3 minute intro, deliver that value right away, and then I always at the end of my interviews I like to give my guests the last word to what is the final punch if someone gets to the very end, like what do I want to leave them with. So I like that. So in terms of, I think this also will tie into some of my fears too, is just as a speaker, I've been a lot more cognizant ever since I started podcasting in terms of how I come off in terms of speech and whatnot, not doing too many filler words. I'm still trying to learn how to get better with that. So I want to ask you, what are some common speech pitfalls that undermine people's authority when they're speaking and delivering a speech?
So a big one for me is people, and I think you've hit the nail on the head with your podcast of starting straight away, going, let's deliver some value straight away. often I see people preambling for a long time, going, "Hello, my name is this, and I'm from this company, and blah 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 blah." And the plan for today's agenda is blah 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 blah. They take ages, and they don't instill that value. So, I think getting the audience on your side, attention-wise, from the beginning, is a great thing. Like you've just done with your podcast. I always say, well, why don't you ask them a question, give them a fact, a figure, something that they go, oh wow, this has grabbed my attention and I want to know more. So starting strong is a real big one. And it's the same thing as also finishing strong. Too often I've seen presenters sort of trail off at the end and they kind of go, okay, and thank you, and that's it. And they sort of trail off. It's a bit of I always treat it like a stand-up comedy. With a comedian, they usually have their best joke last and their second best joke first, and then the middle of the rest of the sort of the comedy set is up down with jokes, but they nail those two beginning and ends because that's what we're going to remember. So I think nailing those is really important. If you are going to use visuals, PowerPoint, I think simplicity is the main thing. Again, I've seen so many death by PowerPoints. There's so much jargon, so much text, and you see presenters do this. Hello, good morning, welcome to my presentation. And they're just staring at the back. And I would always advocate, first of all, do you even need a PowerPoint? Do you even need a slide deck? Hopefully, you know your content in and out, that you don't necessarily need that. So less is more when it comes to those kind of visuals, having that strong start. But another good one is to ensure that you know who your audience is, who you're speaking to, and what they're expecting from that presentation. Because if I've done my audience analysis and I go, right, okay, I'm talking to 30 to 50-year-olds, they're managers, and they want to understand how to create effective content, great. As long as I deliver that, they're going to walk away happy. If I start to deliver about how to make effective content, but they want to understand about how to overcome their nerves, then it's going to be a mismatch. And they're going to walk away going, oh, that wasn't great. That wasn't a great presentation because I wasn't really aligned with it. So ensuring that you've asked the audience, and a great way to do it is to ask them before. Cool, we're having this pitch, we're doing this presentation. What do you want to get out of it? Well, I want to know how you can help us save money. Great, I'm going to focus my presentation on that. I'm not going to focus on the amazing products and services and everything we do, because the only thing you care about is, how does this save me money? Well, we can save you $20,000 a month by this, this, and this. Great, love it. Where do we sign? Rather than saying, our business started in the year 2004 and it from one man into like 50, a 50-person strong team. The audience don't care. We're really selfish as an audience. Like your listeners here are going, right, what's in it for me? What do I want to get out of this conversation? They don't really care about this history of this company because they can Google it, or other search engines are available. But you can just search it online and go, okay, that's what I want to know about the company. I want to know what's in it for me. So that's the other big pitfall. They focus on themselves and not focus on that audience and what they want to get out of it. So those are a couple of ones. And I think the other one is people don't practice. If it's a big presentation, they go, oh, I'm just going to wing it. It'll be fine. I'm used to speaking on the fly. And you might be. But what you're not used to is speaking on the fly under high pressure. So say that pitch, that sales call is worth $1 million. Well, actually, if I haven't practiced that pressurized situation, when the pressure does come, my body, my voice, my mind isn't used to that. And that's when I fumble. That's when I fall to pieces. It's like, again, I'll use a sport analogy of someone who's never played in a championship game, then being thrown into the championship game and having to do the penalty or the free throw, right at the pivotal moment. If they've never practiced under pressure, they're probably going to muck that up and then lose the game and then, that spiraling event. So those are a couple of things I would say are sort of the pitfalls of presenting.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about how, a lot of people, focus on, especially the comedians will do the second best joke in the front, last best joke at the end, and then the middle is kind of like just like this gray area, right? But say like I do want to, keep my audience engaged during that middle area. What could I do to keep them engaged?
I think you've got to use some attention grabbing techniques because our attention will feign, especially if we've got a very long presentation. So doing things like, asking them questions, getting some interaction throughout, which can be hard. And it can be rhetorical questions. It can be asking them just to think about, okay, what if we were to save you $20,000 a month? What would you use that money on? And they can maybe think, and they start to get a bit more engaged in that conversation. Because again, a presentation is a conversation. While I might be, or you might be primarily speaking for a long time, the audience is still going to be feeding back to you with maybe their body language, maybe even interaction, maybe asking questions throughout. So I think using some attention grabbing techniques like that, questions, statements like, last year you earned this. Well, what could we do if we did this next year? Facts, figures, all of these things just to grab us and make us more intrigued. Stories are a great one. Using analogies and stories and go, well, how does this relate to my business? Well, actually, we worked with a client very similar to yours. 2 years ago, they were struggling with high interest rates, this and this and this. And when we took them on, we saved them this, this, and this. So you can help to use stories to solidify that message. And again, pique some interest, especially if you've got a very long presentation, which hopefully, it's not going to be 2 hours long. But if it is that quite long, there are ways to engage us through stories, facts, figures, statements, questions, things like that.
Yeah, I like that you brought up, telling stories because I always love whenever I interview one person and then I'll interview somebody else, especially if it's in a different like topic and they say the same thing. And I brought somebody on that talked about the effectiveness of having stories, and it was more so like for sales purposes. So I'm definitely gonna have to keep that one in my back pocket for sure, for sure. But one thing you mentioned death by PowerPoint. Can you explain that concept real quick?
Yeah, death by PowerPoint is very, very common in the corporate world. It is when someone presents a slide deck using PowerPoint, Google Slides, anything like that, and it is so boring to watch because the slides are full of text, graphs. It's like a complicated document, and so the audience just switch off and they just become detracted because essentially the presenter has presented a document, which is not what PowerPoint is for. PowerPoint should be used to enhance your message using effective visuals and make the concepts easier to understand. But what's typically happening is people will put their script on it and they will use it as a crutch to rely on that, especially when they're panicking or they're worried. They'll go, oh yeah, my script is on my slide, and I'll just read off it throughout the whole presentation. But what that does is it kills off your audience. So death by PowerPoint, the audience just switch off, they become disengaged, and you lose interest. And if you lose interest, then you lose that sale. And they also potentially will think you haven't put as much effort into that presentation. Because while it might be a 5-minute presentation, you should spend a very long time making that the best 5 minutes that person's going to watch, because they're going to feel so valued and respected. There's nothing worse than a presentation that has so much text on it because the speaker hasn't put any time in to make it visually engaging and make it interesting for the audience to watch.
So, in terms of if someone does have a PowerPoint presentation that they're going to deliver, what are some key components or things that they could add or maybe even subtract from their PowerPoint to make it engaging?
So a couple of things I always advocate is we remove the noise from your presentation. So every time we speak, every time we're communicating, there's a signal to noise ratio. We are sending signals that amplify our message, like how we can save you money, all of these things. But there's things that are detracting from our message. On slides, I like to call it like slide junk. A good example is your company logo. We don't have to have a company logo on every single slide of a presentation, because that's the exact same thing as me presenting to you now and going, talking. Hello, my name is Alexander McWilliam. Next slide. Talk. By the way, my name is Alexander McWilliam. Because we know who you are. We can have it on the starting slide. We can have it on the final slide. We know the company. We know who we're speaking to. So that's one thing, cutting that thing out. Cutting page numbers, that's the worst thing. If you see slide 2 of 189, your audience are going to be looking at that going, we're on slide 2 and there's 189 slides in total. This is going to be boring. So trimming off the things you don't need, but also reducing it to its simplicity. Think of it like Zen. It's very minimalistic. Everything on that slide has to have a purpose. It has to offer some value. If it's not offering value, get rid of it. And it's going to be very hard to do because you're going to be like, oh, I need that. I go, do you? Does the audience need that information or do you need it? Because actually, sometimes when we're presenting, we think we need all of the data. But actually, we don't need all of the data. We don't need a massive spreadsheet full of data because the audience aren't going to understand that. What we need is to know the meaning behind this data. We lost £25 million last quarter. That's the meaning. Not we don't need to go month by month on our losses. We're going down. We need to go up. That's the meaning. So simplicity, I think, is the key thing when it comes to presenting. And also challenge yourself. Do you even need a slide deck? Can you do it just orally, just like we are now? Could you even do it with a flip chart, a whiteboard? Maybe you draw some things because it doesn't necessarily need a PowerPoint. But that's the biggest flaw because everyone I have to do a presentation because everyone in the business uses PowerPoint. Most people, yes, it's traditional using PowerPoint and other ones like that. But actually, you might not need it. And the audience might be like, thank God there's not someone using PowerPoint. It's so refreshing. And then you stand out from the crowd.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm glad that you're talking about how pretty much less is more because, like I was telling you off camera about my business where I help people with their content. When I have a slide deck, and I still use one to this day, but like when I first started out, it was probably like, I don't know, it was probably like 30 slides long. And then, over the years, I started doing what you said, do I really need this? I say, do I really need this? And so now I think it's only like 10. So, because it's like, I just want to get to the point. You know what I mean? Like I could cut out all the fluff that I was doing before and just get straight to it. So I like that. So I want to talk more about your journey, right? So you started as an actor, very successful, was on multiple shows, and then you transitioned, got a PhD in psychology. So I wanted to ask you about that. What made you want to make that transition?
So I trained as an actor. I've been acting since I was a kid. Did a lot of stage shows when I was a kid with some amateur dramatic societies. I did some filming as a kid. I was in the Harry Potter films when I was much younger as an extra. So there was around 50 or 60 of us in my theatre company who all got to be part of that Harry Potter series, which was really great fun, especially for a 15-year-old kid to understand that. So that started my journey. And then I trained as an actor, and I love performing. I still perform to this day. Really love it. But alongside acting, there had to be another revenue stream. So I went down the teaching and coaching route, and I was teaching acting, improvisation, and presentation skills. And when I was teaching improv to actors, but also non-actors, so adults who had quote unquote normal jobs, like engineers and things like that, we were using improvisation. They were saying, oh, this is really good. I'm feeling much more confident when I'm in the workplace, when I'm communicating, because I've been taking these improvisation classes. I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. And I wanted to know, well, is there some science behind this? And I'd always been interested by psychology. I'd had an interest in why are people motivated to do the things we do? Why do we get anxious? Why do we get depressed? And I'd been reading a bit of Jung and a bit of Freud, and I'd sort of learned a bit about various psychologists. Like, well, I want to learn a bit more. So I did a master's in psychology to begin with, and that gave me a real understanding of what's going on from a very broad aspect of psychology. And after that, a very good friend and mentor of mine, a guy called Seamus, who I perform with and I teach with, he was doing a master's in performance psychology at a university in Wales. And he said they do PhDs there. And I thought, okay, well, why don't I reach out and see if someone would be interested in being my supervisor to look at the effects of acting and improvisation techniques on anxiety, especially public speaking anxiety. And I had a meeting and they were like, yeah, this sounds like a really interesting idea. Let's do it. So I began my PhD journey in late 2020, which, if anyone's ever done a PhD or they've been in that academic setting, it is a whirlwind of adventures of so much reading, so much studying, learning so many new things. Because I finished my acting degree, And I didn't go back into education for another 10 years. So I did my master's 10 years after graduating. So I hadn't written an essay in so long. And then jumping into an essay and then jumping into a PhD thesis, which mine was around 70,000 words, I think, in the end. And it was such a stressful but also rewarding experience because I got to learn so much more about a subject and my mind was open to so many new theories because my PhD was under the brackets of sports psychology. So I was using loads of sports psychology theories and understandings of performing under pressure, anxiety, why do we fail, things, motivation, all of these aspects. But I was putting it into a non-traditional sports setting, which was public speaking, which I still classed as a sport because I was like, actually, you're still performing. You have to use your voice. You have to use your arms. You have to use your legs. You have to use your muscles and brain to do all of these things. So essentially, it is a sport. It's a performance element. So over 3.5, 4 years of studying, I conducted multiple research papers looking at what was out there on public speaking anxiety, what interventions were successful, what weren't, where are the gaps in the literature. Then I created a questionnaire to identify those specific sources of public speaking anxiety. So like I asked you earlier, so well, what is it specifically that you're finding stressful or worrisome about public speaking? Well, we created a questionnaire to speed that process up. So rather than us spending, say, an hour understanding what we're worried about, I would go, here's a questionnaire. Cool. Okay, you answered this, this, and this. Let's talk about that in much more depth. And then the last study I did was looking at acting and improvisation to go, okay, can this be used to help people become more confident and less anxious when we're speaking? And on the plus side, there is evidence to support that, which is great. So the use of regular acting and improvisation classes can help people have longer speech durations, reduce that anxiety, and increase their self-efficacy, a posh word for confident that you're going to do a good job in public speaking, which is really great to see. And then as I graduated, I managed to do several conferences across. Actually, I was in Vegas in October doing a conference, which was really lovely, and I was over in Europe as well, presenting my research because it's quite. Even though it's a common worry, public speaking is so common. 63% of people fear public speaking, and if you're socially anxious, that fear rises to like 97%. So it's very prevalent among a lot of people, but there's very limited research. And there's very limited effective interventions that help to overcome it. Because a lot of people will go, I'm worried, I don't really know what to do. I'm just going to try and push forward and try and do it. But actually confronting the fear is such a big task. And we don't know, well, how do we do it? And I don't want people to know that I'm afraid of it. Because if people know I'm afraid, then in a work setting, they might use that as they go, oh yeah, he's afraid of public speaking. Let's make him do the presentation. Then he looks like an idiot and I get his job promotion. So those are some worries that we potentially will have when we're presenting or why we don't want to. So that's my little journey of from actor to researcher and coach. And while I was doing all this, I was coaching various individuals and corporations in presentation skills, public speaking, and how to overcome those fears and worries related to presenting. So a whirlwind of acting, improv, and teaching and coaching and studying.
That's a crazy journey, especially like you had that 10-year gap. And so one thing I wanted to ask you, like now that you're, teaching and consulting, what is something that you learned in psychology that you still utilize to this day to help with your consulting and coaching clients?
I think there's so many things. The main one I really love is there's a couple actually. There's a term or there's a concept called a performance catastrophe, which is really interesting. So a lot of people say there's an optimal level of physiological arousal, so heightened state of alertness. So my heart rate I'm ready to perform. And there is a heightened level, like think of it like an inverted U. So at the top of the U, we get top performance and top that's when our arousal is at a peak level. However, what we think of sometimes presume is that as we get more sort of alert, our performance should slowly dwindle sort of downwards. And that sometimes happens. But when we're performing under pressure and we have cognitive anxiety, which is a posh term for worry, when we're highly worried, rather than our performance slowly going down and nice and easy sort of, our performance gradually gets worse. Instead, think of it like a wave where it dramatically crashes down, and then it takes us ages to get back to that peak performance. The best example I have is a basketball player. It's a championship game, and they've been given the free throw and they miss. And then for the rest of that game, they are missing shots, they're missing passes, they're falling to pieces. Their performance has crashed down to the bottom. And essentially what they've had a performance catastrophe where they're all to pieces. They're not performing anywhere near as optimally as they should. So that's a really interesting concept, because actually the best way to recover from that is to leave the arena, calm down a little bit physically, and just ease it up, and then come back in, and then you'll be able to perform back to your optimal level. But too often or not, we stay in stuff. And that's why you sometimes see a coach bench a player for 10 minutes, get them down, calm down a bit, and then they go back into the game. So that's one area which I think was really interesting. And then the other area was about how it's a cognitive appraisal process, which is when every situation we encounter, we will compare the task demands. So what's going to be demanded from us, the complexity of the presentation, the audience size, the whatever we're talking about, and our personal resources. So how well we think we can do the task. And if we have enough resources, then we treat that situation as a challenge and we go, okay, I can handle that. However, if the task demands outweigh those kind of resources that we have, then we treat that situation as a threat and we experience those more anxieties and fears. So that helped me to understand and go, okay, well, can we challenge those task demands and go, actually, how do we make the task easier for us? So actually, if I've got a big presentation, I go, well, can I break it down? Maybe I just do the introduction of that presentation and someone else takes it over, makes it easier. Or if it's a lack of resources, how do I increase my resources? Well, I can do some training. Come with me. We do some coaching. We make it easier. We have all of these mastery experiences to make it easier for us. Then we have our perceptions of our resources being much greater than the task demands, and it becomes easier. It's like when sport is such a great example. You know, if you're playing again a championship game against a really hard team, you know it's going to be quite a challenge, or maybe even it's going to be a bit fearful, quite challenged. But if you're playing, the little league team or whatever it might be, and there's a team of you and you're all 6'5", 7 foot, you're probably going to have that team is going to be quite easy, and you're going to take that match is going to be really easy to play against, because it's like, oh, this is such easy. It's nowhere. Our resources are way above what's the task demand. So that's something that I think is really interesting to reflect on. I go, well, where are my resources? How do I increase them? What are the task demands? Are they legitimate? And can I decrease them? Or is it true? Oh, it's going to be really hard. There's going to be 1,000 people there. Is that true? Well, actually, there's only going to be 500 people there. And actually, you only have to speak for a minute. Oh, okay. So I'm challenging my perception of what I think those demands are going to be. So I think that's a really interesting one to take, especially to a coaching client.
Yeah, I like that. Asking yourself like, what is true?
Hmm.
And because a lot of times, like, we just have these heightened senses and like put a whole lot of pressure on ourselves, especially if you're delivering a really important speech. But one thing that you were talking about, and you gave a basketball analogy about the performance catastrophe, and how the best instance is to bench a player, have them come back and reset. However, in a setting where, say, like, you're delivering a speech, you can't really necessarily do that. So in the event that you are giving a speech and you do have a performance catastrophe, which hopefully nobody does, but it can happen, what can they do to get themselves back on track?
Yeah, because you can't just leave. You can't just
Yeah.
exit the room and go, I'm going to come back in 10 minutes and we'll do this. But it goes back to something you could do is then throw it back to the audience again and go, okay, after I've just spoken, take a moment now and have a think. Or has anyone got any questions about what I've sort of spoken about? And when they're sort of formulating their answers, you maybe go have a drink, you maybe just take a couple of deep breaths, and you try and just calm things down as it goes. Or if you're finding very anxious because there's lots of what you perceive to be scary people in the room, find the friendly faces. there's always going to be someone smiling, and hopefully someone smiling, like, oh yeah, this is really good. Just find them and just use them as a little bit as a soothing technique to go, someone likes me in this presentation. So yeah, you can't run away, but if you're presenting as part of a group, you could always go, my colleague's going to take over. But I think throw it back to the audience, have a drink of water, just sort of take a moment, and then go back into it. And hopefully that eases it up a bit so you're not as sort of panicky.
Hmm. Absolutely. So that takes a little, impromptu. That's one thing that I've been trying to get better at, like doing things on the fly. Terrible at doing that. That's why I like text messages and I don't like, you know what I mean? Because I can sit there and think about what I'm about to say. But so improv is a skill, and everybody doesn't have that skill. So can you walk me through the steps that you take your clients through to get better at improv?
Yeah, so the first thing is, while you say, I'm not used to sort of improv, but we're improvising every single day of our lives. The conversations we have with friends, families, and colleagues, they're rarely scripted. And even if we have the scripted one, maybe it's a proposal, maybe it's like a really important conversation, that script goes out of the window because the other person doesn't have the script and they say or do something you're not expecting, and you're going to have to improvise. So the first thing I say is we all improvise on a regular basis. But what we're not used to is, again, improvising under those kind of pressurized situations. So the great thing is there are so many different improvisation exercises, all with a slightly different aim at what they're trying to work on. For example, one might be if we were doing some pair work and I wanted to get you used to presenting or speaking on the fly, I might say, okay, look, tell me a story. Just make up a story for me really casually. It's just the two of us and we're having a very casual conversation. And if you're like, I don't know how to do that, I go, well, tell me about your day. Tell me about your commute. Okay, well, I woke up, I got the train from this station, I did this. Great. You're technically improvising. Yes, it's a true event, but you're improvising that story. So that you've mastered that. You've mastered the ability to essentially recount a story that has happened in your life. So that's an improvisation. Then I can make it harder and make your brain think and go, okay, you're going to tell the exact same story again. But every so often, I'm going to say, every so often it's going to be like, it's like I was there with you. I was there with you on the night out, and I know really what happened. So every so often, I'm going to say, no, it didn't happen like that, did it? And you're going to have to say, nope, you're right, and you change something. For example, if I was to make up a story of like, I was walking down the road. I go, no, you weren't walking. I was running down the road. No, you weren't running. I was jogging. And you make the person think outside the box and keep pushing them, because it's so fun to watch someone's brain work, because you keep pushing them. If you keep saying no, the brain goes in a very weird way. It's like, I was walking, I was running, I was jogging, I was hopscotching, I was dragging a body with me. Okay, now our brain starts going in the weird outside of the box idea. So it's all just about skills. So that's one, for example, about storytelling, removing ambiguity, having to adapt and change. So as with a presentation, you might have a presentation, but then you have to change and adapt to what you're doing because the audience asks a question or reacts in a different way. So that practices that. There's improvisation exercises to do listening, creativity, all of these things. And I treat it like a gym routine. You go, okay, I do my warm up, like I would limber up my muscles before a workout. Right, today's going to be squats. Okay, well, today's going to be stories exercises. Treating it again like sports training, like fitness, anything like that. Repetition is going to help to develop that. And also playing with other people. I'm sure there are some in your town, your city, where there's loads of opportunities to take an improv class. Mm-hmm. Would highly recommend it. If you can get a great class that has some fun, it's a fun experience and they practice lots of different techniques, you can build up your experience, your mastery experiences of thinking on the fly, and then you can become more comfortable. That's why when we did my study with my PhD, people could speak for longer in a speech duration because they were used to improvising and making speeches up, because they'd had so many mastery experiences of, I can do it. It's like, again, I'll use basketball as such a great analogy. The first time I try and do a free throw, I'm probably not going to be that great. After I've done 1,000 of them, I'm probably going to be much more confident in my ability to at least do it or get it in, or at least in a majority of the time. It is that repetition is the best way to develop that skill.
So how can someone measure whether they're truly improving as a public speaker over time?
People won't like to do this, but I would always recommend that you record yourself. If you go, okay, my New Year's resolution or even my new year starting, today, is going to be to get better at public speaking. The first thing you should do is you set up a camera in your bedroom or in your office and you film yourself doing a presentation. It could be one you've done before. It could be a personal one where you just kind of talk for 5 minutes. When you've done that, what you're going to do, that gives you your baseline level of performance. You're right, that's where I'm going to compare next time. It's like, again, if you're training in a sport or you're training at the gym, you do your monthly weigh-ins. You do your beginning weigh-ins and measurements. You go, right, okay, I'm this waist, I'm this hips, I'm this arm, great. In 2 months' time, I'm going to remeasure myself. It's the same thing. In 2 months' time, you refilm yourself and you compare the footage. But when you are comparing it, you have to be objective, because we're going to be so subjective in our feelings. We go, oh, I'm rubbish. Oh, God, I'm so bad, aren't I? But if you say I'm good or bad, all that does is feed or hurt your ego. What we can say, though, is go, what was effective? What was ineffective? Okay, I was really effective at my pace. I was nice and slow. I was really effective at this. Okay. I was really ineffective with my use of pause because there was no time that I was pausing. I was really ineffective at my openers because it was too slow and it didn't really grab the audience's attention. Because when we go objectively, we can take our ego out of it and we can look at where we need specific help. And sometimes you might need someone else to watch it and go, okay, and give you that objective feedback going, look, from this one to this one, you've already slowed down, you've done this, you've done this, you've done this. So regular filming, watching it back and comparing it is the best way to see how that journey is progressing.
And then you mentioned, pace, pauses, things like that. Anything else that people should look out for when they're
Yeah.
rewatching their recordings?
Yeah. So sometimes what I like to do is, because it's quite hard to visually and audibly do both at the same time. So if you record it, put your phone down and just listen to it and listen to your voice. So you don't have to look at your body, just listen to it for the first time. And you can listen out for pace, so how fast you're going. You can listen to volume. Are you loud enough that you can hear every single word? Your clarity, because we tend to lip read a little bit anyway. So if you can't see it, can we hear every single word nice and clearly? How's my pitch range? Am I quite monotonous or is it quite melodic in my pitch? So it's nice and fluid as opposed to hello, welcome to my presentation. It's all kind of flat. How melodic is it? Have I got any all of these things we call disfluencies? How many of those have you got in them? And things like that, use of pause as well, use of stress. How am I stressing my words? So those are things you can listen out for. And then once you've listened out for it, turn your phone over. You can watch it, put it on mute, so you don't have to listen to anything, and look at your body. Are you fidgeting? So a common one, if you've got long hair, is you fidget with your hair like this. If you have a necklace, that's a big fidgeter. If you have if you have pockets, if you have change, you have coins, things like that. Are you just doing things with your body? If you've got a clicky pen, please don't have a clicky pen when you're presenting, because people tend to just click it all the time when they're nervous. But if you have you got stuff that you are doing that looks like that makes you look like you're not as comfortable. Also, when we're presenting, are we gluing our feet or are we moving all around? We can move around the stage, that's fine. But if we only take half a step forward and half a step back and half a step to the side, it looks a little bit odd. So how are we moving? And also, if we are standing still, are we doing, I know people who do this when they're presenting, because they don't want to move, but they still want to do some sort of movement. So essentially, they soothe themselves to sleep by rocking. So are you doing that?
That's funny.
And if you are presenting online, look, are you if you are presenting, make sure your camera's not like this, or you're in the right position for your camera. So looking at it from a visual point of view, those are things I would say to look out for. And then once you've done that, you've got some nice audible things to think about, and you've got some visual things to work on as well. So those are two aspects you can kind of look at and give yourself feedback on.
Yeah, you definitely call me out there because sometimes whenever I do like impromptu interviews, I'll go maybe to like either a conference or event or whatever. I'll bring my lapel mic and I'll interview people. I remember I said this to my fraternity brother, and he was like, you keep doing this GTA sway where like I just sway back and forth. And the thing is like I never even noticed it until he like pointed it out. Like it's just something that I just commonly do. So I'm gonna have to work on that for sure.
I think because you don't notice it until people point it out. Like they go, "Oh, was
Hmm.
I? Was I doing that? Oh God, I wasn't even realizing it." Necklaces are a very common one. When someone's nervous, they tend to just grab that necklace and sort of do that, or a lanyard or something. They tend to hold things like that, but they don't notice until someone says, do know you're doing that?" And they go, "Oh," but as soon as they're aware of it, then they actually stop doing it, or they reduce the amount of time they do it and go, "Oh." And if someone can give them that fast feedback loop of going, "Oh no, you did it again," you go, "Oh, so that's what I do when I'm that nervous or when that happens." So that goes back to getting that fast feedback to go, yep, I'm going to correct that mistake.
Exactly. You got to get that feedback. When I first started the podcast, that was one thing I was doing. I was rewatching all my interviews, single speed, just making sure like catching and taking different notes on different things I was doing. Just because I want to improve. As much as I hate having to, hear my voice on through through the screen and whatnot. I just had somebody on. So we also talking about public speaking. We're talking about how like we hear our voice differently than other people hear our voice, which is just crazy to me. So I wish I could hear everybody my voice how everybody else hears it, but it's not like that. But for someone who's already good at public speaking, what's the next level of mastery look like?
It's that pressure, it's that impromptu kind of pressurized training. So if you feel, yeah, I'm quite a good, confident speaker, I'll go, what is the most stressful situation? For example, there's different ways we can stress it out. So it could be that you're very confident at your current level in your business, but maybe there's that $1 million pitch that you've never done, but it's so important. If you get it, it will change your business forever. So the stakes are really high. So that could be something that we want to practice towards. But it could also be, how do we handle disruptions and distractions when we're presenting? Example would be someone comes in mid presentation and they're on their phone and they're still chatting. Can you still remain poised and perform while you've got that distraction? Or something happens in the audience, or tech goes down, PowerPoint goes, can you still deliver your presentation without? So for those who are confident, I would say, again, push those boundaries and go, well, what's going to stress me out? Well, I'm really confident in my presentation. Great, let's get rid of it. What happens now? Oh, okay, I've got to now on the fly. So it might go back to your kind of how comfortable will you be doing it on the fly, or changing the brief. An example would be, a lot of clients I have often get briefed saying, I've got to deliver this 30-minute presentation. But sometimes we get into the presentation, the client goes, I've only got 10 minutes. So can you rapidly change your presentation that you practiced from a 30-minute presentation to one that's 10 minutes that still seems concise, engaging, and doesn't lose anything, but you've had no prep time to change it? So again, that goes back to, can we practice those situations? So I think let's ramp up the pressure and give you some fun pressurized situations to push your buttons and see what makes you work.
Yeah, that's a big one. The one that you said towards the end about, sometimes I'll get on a sales call. It's supposed to be, maybe 30 minutes long. And they're like, all right, well, even though I booked this time and it says that it's a 30-minute meeting, I really only have like 10 minutes. I was like, damn, all right, cool. Well, now I gotta, really just get right to it, get right to it. But Dr. McWilliam, we're coming to the end of the interview. And like I told you earlier, I like to, give the last word to my guests. Any wisdom you want to drop on the people?
With presentations, yes, they do. Yes, they are. They can feel scary and they can feel intimidating and they feel overwhelming at the get go. However, if you can improve your ability to communicate, it can be so rewarding, both personally and professionally. So I would encourage you to take the plunge and take a step out of your comfort zone and really expand that skill set when it comes to presenting and public speaking, because your life will change like you have no idea. And you will just, it's hard to express. I came from a background of, while I was an actor, I still didn't enjoy public speaking when I was younger, but it's changed the way I'm doing it, from opening doors to communicating to people. Having conversations like this is so rewarding. So take the plunge and don't avoid that practice, because practice will help. Even if you're not enjoying it, the consistency will allow you to thrive. Like any good sports person, they consistently work in day out, and you will become the best possible version of yourself. So don't avoid it. Confront that dragon and get the gold that is the public speaking joy.
Thank you so much for that wisdom that you were speaking directly to me because I've been putting that off for a while. I literally went to Howard University, asked them about it, tried was gonna get on their schedule and all this other stuff, and I don't know, I just chickened out. I think what it was is I just felt like I wasn't qualified enough, even though I'm speaking to my alma mater. I'm relatively removed, so I'm definitely gonna take you up on that for sure. But thank you so much for coming on Beyond Ordinary. Where can the people find you at?
They can find me. Our website for my company is www.improvforbusiness.co.uk, which is the number 4, or connect with me on LinkedIn under Dr. Alexander McWilliam. Always happy to chat and find out more, really.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I hope you guys learned something new today about public speaking. Let's go slay that dragon, like Dr. McWilliam said. Until next time, peace.